The classified ad for Anchor Point Plaza might as well have read, "Wanted, desperate soul, preferably with nothing left to lose." Suited me down to the ground. Ethan Vance, former Marine, current, well, let's just say between engagements. Engagements with sobriety, mostly. Engagements with a life that hadn't felt like mine since Lena and Lily, since the accident. The tremor in my hands wasn't just the chill of the late October air. It was the ghost of last night's bourbon, and the one before that, and the one I was already craving. But a man's gotta eat, even if he's forgotten why. So there I was, standing before the skeletal husk of Anchor Point Plaza. It loomed against the bruised twilight sky like a forgotten beast, windows dark and gaping like empty eye sockets. The pay was garbage, the hours worse, but it was a job. Something to fill the echoing silence of my nights, even if it was just swapping one kind of haunting for another. The interview, if you could call it that, took place in a cramped, musty office, just inside what must have once been a service entrance. Mr. Garrett, the mall manager, was a relic himself. He sat in a battered wheelchair, one leg clearly artificial beneath his slacks, the other twisted at an unnatural angle. His face was a roadmap of past pains, dominated by a thick, puckered scar that pulled one side of his mouth into a permanent, unnerving grimace. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Vance, right? Ex-military?" His voice was a gravelly rasp, like stones grinding together. "Yes, sir, Marines." He nodded slowly, eyes like chips of flint boring into me. "Good. You'll need the discipline." He pushed a heavy ring of keys across the scarred surface of his desk. They clanked with a dull, final sound. "These open everything. Except the places you shouldn't go, you'll figure those out." He then slid a clipboard towards me. On it, a single, laminated sheet titled Anchor Point Plaza Nightshift Protocols. Rules. I'd lived by rules my whole life, mostly. These felt different before I'd even read them. "It's not getting in here, that's the problem, Vance," Garrett said, his gaze flicking towards the darkened mall beyond his office door. "It's getting out." He paused, letting that sink in. "And one more thing." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that sent an involuntary shiver down my spine despite the stale, warm air. "If you see anyone, if you think you see anyone, don't try to save them. They ain't people no more." I just grunted, not sure what to make of that. Crazy old coot, probably, but a paying crazy old coot. I pocketed the keys, grabbed the clipboard. Got it. He watched me, that unsettling half-smile fixed on his face. "We'll see." The main doors groaned open like the lid of a forgotten crypt as I pushed my way into the plaza proper. The silence hit me first. Not a quiet, peaceful silence, but a thick, cloying absence of sound that pressed in on my eardrums. It was the kind of silence that screamed louder than any explosion. My footsteps echoed unnaturally on the cracked linoleum, each one a small intrusion in a vast, dead space. Then the smell, old fire, acrid and biting, overlaid with the cloying sweetness of melted plastic and something else, something vaguely organic, like spoiled meat left too long in the sun. It clung to the back of my throat, a taste of ash and decay. My stomach clenched. Even in the worst hellholes in Afghanistan, nothing had smelled quite like this. Dim emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows that writhed and danced as if with a life of their own. The storefronts were dark, many boarded up, others with shattered windows displaying faded, sun-bleached mannequins in grotesque poses. Dust lay thick on everything, a gray shroud over a forgotten world. It was a mausoleum to forgotten commerce, a monument to decay. A profound sense of unease settled over me, cold and heavy as a lead blanket. This wasn't just an abandoned mall. It felt wrong, like stepping into a place where the air itself was sick. Mr. Garrett's words echoed in my mind. "They ain't people no more." I swallowed hard. the taste of bile and that god-awful charred smell mixing unpleasantly. My hand instinctively went to the Zippo in my pocket, Lena's last gift. Its familiar weight was a small comfort. Just a job, I told myself. Get through the night. But a part of me, the part that had seen too much and felt too little for too long, knew this was more than just a job. Anchor Point Plaza wasn't just derelict. It was waiting. My boots crunched on fallen plaster and God knows what else as I started my first official patrol of Anchor Point Plaza. Clipboard in hand, though I hadn't even glanced at Garrett's protocols yet. Seemed more important to get the lay of this concrete tomb. The air was still, heavy with that burnt plastic perfume, but now, as I moved deeper into the main concourse, I noticed other things. The emergency lights, the only illumination apart from the weak moonlight filtering through grimy skylights, weren't steady. They flickered, pulsed almost, like a failing heartbeat. Shadows writhed in the corners of my vision, elongating and shrinking with the erratic lights, playing tricks on eyes already tired from too little sleep and too much cheap whiskey. I told myself it was just the faulty wiring of a condemned building, but the part of me that had learned to trust its gut in far-off sandy hellholes wasn't so sure. That gut was currently doing a slow, uncomfortable churn. This place, it was a skeleton picked clean. Storefronts gaped open, names like Radiance Jewelers and Style Sensations barely legible under layers of grime and graffiti. Mannequins, some still dressed in faded, tattered fashions, stood in silent judgment, their plastic smiles unnervingly cheerful in the gloom. I passed a cinema, its marquee letters long gone, leaving only ghostly outlines. A department store, 3 stories of shadowed retail space, loomed like a silent, accusing giant at the far end of the concourse. Every now and then, a faint scraping sound would echo from somewhere deep within the mall's guts, or a sudden gust of unexpectedly cold air would whisper past, raising the hairs on my arms. Standard derelict building stuff, I tried to convince myself, just the old girl settling. Nah. I found myself in what was obviously once the food court. The layout was familiar from 1,000 other malls, a central seating area, now a wasteland of overturned tables and broken chairs, surrounded by the husks of fast food joints. Burger Barn, Pizza Pit, Dragon Walk. Their signs hung askew, paint peeling, the smell of stale grease and something else, something metallic and sharp, hung heavy here, mingling with the ever-present aroma of old fire. Tattered, faded banners still clung precariously to the ceiling, proclaiming a Black Friday blowout. The irony wasn't lost on me. It looked like the blowout had been literal. Debris was everywhere, shattered plates, discarded food containers, and what looked like personal belongings dropped in a hurry, as if people had simply vanished mid-bite. It was amidst this chaos, tucked beneath an overturned table advertising Frosty Swirls ice cream, that I saw it. A small, singed teddy bear. Its fur was matted and blackened on one side, and one of its button eyes was missing. Its left arm was gone too, torn clean off at the shoulder seam, leaving a pathetic stump of stuffing. Something about that beat-up old bear. It snagged at a loose thread in the tightly wound mess of my insides. Lily had a bear like that. Barnaby, she'd called him. He'd gone everywhere with her. For a moment, the oppressive silence of the mall seemed to deepen, to focus right on that little discarded toy. I knelt, my knees cracking in protest, and reached for it. My fingers brushed against the surprisingly soft, albeit grimy fur. As I picked it up, a strange sensation ran through me. The Zippo in my jeans pocket, the one Lena had given me for our last anniversary before everything, suddenly felt heavy. Not just its usual reassuring weight, but a dense, leaden heaviness. Then it vibrated. Just once, a distinct, sharp buzz against my thigh. I froze, bear still in hand. What the hell? I'd carried that lighter for years. It had never done anything like that. My heart began to thud a little harder against my ribs, and then I heard it. Faint, so faint I almost dismissed it as the wind, or my own grief-addled imagination playing tricks. But there was no mistaking the sound. A little girl's voice, whispering from somewhere in the echoing darkness of the food court. "Daddy?" My blood ran cold. The word, that specific, beloved word, sliced through me like a shard of ice. It was a perfect echo, a phantom limb of sound. It was Lily's voice. My Lily. The daughter I'd buried. The daughter whose laughter I only ever heard, in the cruelest of dreams. My head snapped up, eyes frantically scanning the shadowed corners, the gaping maws of the abandoned food stalls. Lily? The name was a choked whisper on my lips, raw and desperate. Silence. Only the oppressive, waiting silence of Anchor Point Plaza answered. But I'd heard it. I knew I had. And that little, singed teddy bear in my hand suddenly felt like the only real thing in this whole God-forsaken place. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Daddy?" The word, Lily's voice, echoed in the dead space of the food court, replaying in my mind. Each repetition a fresh stab of an old, deep wound. Logic, what little I had left after years marinating in cheap booze and regret, screamed at me. Hallucination, grief, lack of sleep. But the tremor in my hands wasn't just the DTs anymore. That voice, it had been too real, too pure, and the Zippo, heavy and buzzing in my pocket, it knew something. Shaken, yeah, you could say that. More like an earthquake had ripped through the foundations of whatever sanity I still clung to. But compelled? Absolutely. If there was even a whisper of a chance, a 1 in a billion phantom possibility that it was her, or something connected to her, I had to know. The alternative, going back to my empty apartment, to the bottle, to the crushing weight of her absence, was a hell I already knew too well. This new, terrifying unknown suddenly felt like the only path forward, even if it led straight to damnation. Clutching the singed teddy bear, I pushed myself to my feet. The voice had come from deeper in the mall, down a narrower corridor that branched off the food court, a passage I hadn't noticed before. It was darker here, the emergency lights fewer and farther between, casting pools of sickly yellow in the oppressive blackness. As I stepped into the corridor, the air grew colder, and a faint, rhythmic sighing sound seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It was almost imperceptible, like the building itself was drawing slow, shallow breaths. The shadows pulsed with it, making the walls appear to subtly expand and contract. A breathing corridor. My skin crawled. Lining this grotesque passage were more mannequins. Dozens of them, male and female, adults and children, frozen in unnervingly lifelike poses. Some were missing limbs. Others had cracked faces, their painted smiles twisted into leers by the flickering light. Their dead plastic eyes seemed to follow me as I moved, a silent, judging audience. I gritted my teeth, my hand straying towards the reassuring shape of the Leatherman on my belt. Old habits. Halfway down this nightmarish gallery, one figure stood out. A female mannequin, adult-sized, dressed in a tattered, once fashionable dress. Its right arm was missing, a jagged break at the shoulder, eerily similar to the teddy bear I still clutched. Its remaining left arm was outstretched, plastic finger pointing directly at a section of the wall to my right. My gaze followed its silent direction. A boarded-up storefront. Unlike the others, this one wasn't just dark. It was sealed tight with heavy planks of wood nailed haphazardly across what must have once been a display window and an entrance. No name, no sign, just raw, weathered timber. But from behind that barricade, I heard it again. Clearer this time, unmistakably Lily. "Daddy, I'm scared." A choked sob escaped me. Fear warred with a desperate, agonizing hope. The boards looked old, but not impassable. Using the pry bar on my Leatherman, I began to work on the lowest plank. The wood was rotten in places, splintering easily. With a final desperate heave, it groaned and ripped free. I squeezed through the narrow opening into absolute darkness. The air inside was thick, cloying, like dust and old candy and something else, something sickly sweet and metallic, my Zippo. I flicked it open, the flames sputtering to life, casting flickering light on a toy store. Shelves lined the walls, mostly bare, but some still holding a scattering of dust-covered toys, dolls with vacant stares, broken toy soldiers, a faded board game. And then I saw her. Or it. In the center of the store, illuminated by the wavering flame of my lighter, was a sight that clawed at the edges of my sanity. A shopping cart, one of the old metal ones, rusted and bent. Fused into it, somehow, was a teenage girl. Or what had once been a teenage girl. Her torso, thin and pale, jutted from the basket, her lower body lost within the twisted metal. Her own arms were gone, replaced by smooth, jointed mannequin limbs, grotesquely attached at the shoulders. Her head lolled to one side, dark hair matted across a face that was young, too young, but contorted in an expression of silent agony. As I stared, horrified, my dog tags, tucked beneath my shirt, suddenly grew warm against my chest, a prickling heat that spread outwards. Then, the creature's head twitched. Its eyes, vacant and clouded, slowly focused on me. And from its lips, in Lily's perfect, innocent voice, came the words that shattered what little remained of my composure. "I'm scared, Daddy. It's so dark in here." A strangled cry tore from my throat. This thing wasn't Lily. It couldn't be. But the voice, my mind recoiled, a primal terror seizing me. I scrambled backwards, knocking over a display of something soft that scattered around my feet. I turned and lunged for the opening I'd made, a desperate, animal need to escape consuming me. Bursting back into the breathing corridor, gasping for air that didn't taste of death and plastic, I stumbled a few paces before leaning against the wall. Chest heaving, my Zippo clattered to the floor. When I dared to look back at the one-armed mannequin that had pointed the way, a fresh wave of cold dread washed over me. It had moved. Its single arm was no longer pointing at the toy store. Now its chipped plastic finger was aimed down the corridor, towards the dark, looming silhouette of the mall's main escalators. My breath came in ragged gasps, each one dragging that god-awful smell of burnt plastic and something else, something indefinably wrong, deeper into my lungs. The image of that thing in the toy store, that grotesque fusion of girl and metal and plastic, speaking with Lily's voice, was seared onto the inside of my eyelids. My stomach roiled. I wanted a drink. I wanted to run. I wanted to wake up from this nightmare. Oh, but the one-armed mannequin, its silent, insistent pointing, held me captive. It was like a signpost in hell, directing me to the next circle. The escalators. They loomed at the end of the breathing corridor, twin behemoths of motionless steel and rubber, leading up into an even deeper darkness on the second level. Frozen. Dead. Just like everything else in this cursed mill. My Zippo lay where I'd dropped it. I bent, my hand shaking, and picked it up. The metal was still warm, unnaturally so. As my fingers closed around it, the flame, which had extinguished when it fell, suddenly flared to life again, unbidden. But this wasn't its usual steady yellow glow. This was a startling, brilliant blue flame, intense and almost cold to look at. It danced for a moment, impossibly bright in the gloom before it leaped from the lighter, a tiny, independent will-o'-the-wisp, and then abruptly died, the Zippo falling from my nerveless fingers once more. It clattered onto the grimy floor near the base of the up escalator, landing with a metallic chink right beside the dusty, scuffed boots of another mannequin. This one was a security guard, uniformed and stiff, its plastic face set in a perpetually vacant expression of diligence. As I stared, dumbfounded by the lighter's bizarre behavior, a thin, spidery crack appeared on the mannequin's cheek. It spread, with an audible creak, branching out across its face like ice fracturing on a frozen pond. Then, with a soft, sickening pop, the face cracked open. Not empty plastic inside, no, a thick, black, oily substance, viscous and glistening, began to leak from the cracks, oozing down the mannequin's chin and dripping onto its pristine uniform. It pooled on the floor, reflecting the dim emergency lights like a dark, disturbed mirror. As I watched, mesmerized and horrified, the surface of that black oil rippled. An image formed, immensely. Not a reflection of the derelict mall, but something else entirely. Sunlight. Bright, warm sunlight. A picnic blanket spread on green grass. Lena, her hair shining, her smile so wide it crinkled the corners of her eyes. And Lily, small and giggling, blowing out the candles on a brightly frosted birthday cake. Her 7th birthday. A memory so precious, so achingly beautiful, it felt like a physical blow. A ghost of warmth, of laughter, of a life that was gone forever, shimmering in that foul black ooze. My chest ached with a sudden, unbearable pressure. They show you what you miss. Or what they miss. The voice, gravelly and familiar, startled me so badly, I nearly jumped out of my skin. I spun around. Mr. Garrett. He was there, at the entrance to the corridor, his wheelchair maneuvering almost silently over the debris-strewn floor. How had he gotten there so quietly? His scarred face was grim in the dim light, his eyes holding a strange mixture of pity and something knowing. What the hell is going on here, Garrett? I managed, my voice hoarse. What are these things? He gestured with a gnarled hand towards the weeping mannequin, towards the mall in general. Drifters, he said, the word heavy with a weariness that seemed bone deep. Souls. Caught. The fire. Vance, the big one, years ago. It didn't just burn the mall. It broke something. Broke reality. Right here in this spot. They're stuck between dimensions, worlds, whatever you want to call it. His words hung in the stale air, preposterous, and yet, in the face of what I'd just seen, horribly plausible. Drifters. Souls trapped in a broken reality. It explained the voice, the impossible fusions, the memories in the oil. It explained the oppressive wrongness of Anchor Point Plaza. The mall, it feeds on misery, on memory, Garrett continued, his gaze distant. And it offers reflections, twists them. Don't trust what you see, especially if the walls start sweating. He paused, then looked directly at me, his eyes sharp. You need to keep moving. Check the cinema, top floor, and the old Grandmark department store. They congregate there. Stronger signals. He wheeled a little closer, his voice dropping. And Vance? Stay away from reflections if the walls start sweating black. That's when the place really starts to lie. The cinema. The department store. More places to find these drifters. And a warning that sounded more like a death sentence. My head was spinning. This wasn't just a security gig. This was something else entirely. And I was already in way over my head. Garrett's words. Drifters. Broken reality. Stay away from reflections if the walls start sweating. Churned in my mind as I cautiously began to ascend the frozen escalators. Each step upwards felt heavier than the last, like I was climbing into the belly of some great, dead beast. The air grew colder, and the silence here on the second level was somehow even more profound, more absolute. It pressed in, muffling the sound of my own increasingly ragged breathing. This whole damn mall, Garrett had said it fed on misery and memory. My misery, my memories. It felt less like a place and more like a custom-built purgatory, reflecting the guilt and loss that had been my constant companions since I'd lost Lena and Lily. Maybe that's why I was seeing Lily, hearing her. Maybe this place was just an echo chamber for my own private hell. The thought offered a strange, grim sort of comfort. If it was all in my head, at least it wasn't real. But the warmth of my dog tags, still faintly tingling against my skin, and the memory of that oily vision from the mannequin argued otherwise. The second floor was a mirror image of the first in its desolation. More darkened storefronts, more scattered debris, more silent, watching mannequins. But there was a difference here. A faint sound, almost too low to register, was threading its way through the silence. Music. A tinny, slightly off-key melody. As I moved towards the far end of the concourse, where a faded sign proclaimed Anchor Point Cineplex 8, the music grew clearer. My blood ran cold. I knew that song. You're my sunshine, my only sunshine. Lily's favorite. The one Lena used to sing to her every night before bed. The one I hadn't been able to listen to since. My throat constricted. My hand, the one not clutching the singed teddy bear, clenched into a fist. This place wasn't just reflecting my grief, it was weaponizing it, twisting the knife with an almost sadistic precision. The entrance to the Cineplex was a gaping black maw. The ticket booth was shattered, glass crunching under my boots as I stepped through. Inside, the lobby was a wreck. Popcorn littered the sticky floor like dirty snow. Faded movie posters for films long forgotten peeled from the walls, and the concession stand looked like a bomb had gone off in it. The air was thick with the smell of stale butter, dust, and that underlying char. The song was louder here, clearly emanating from one of the theaters. Theater 3. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning from within. With a deep breath that did nothing to calm the frantic thumping in my chest, I pushed it open. Darkness. Absolute, impenetrable darkness, save for a single, flickering beam of light emanating from the projection booth at the back. It cut through the gloom like a ghostly sword, illuminating swirling dust motes. The song, You Are My Sunshine, seemed to swell, a ghostly, sorrowful lullaby. As my eyes adjusted, I saw that the projector wasn't showing a movie. Not in the conventional sense. The beam of light splashed chaotic, disjointed images onto the tattered screen. Flickering flames, screaming faces blurred by smoke and panic. The twisted wreckage of the mall's interior during the fire Garrett had mentioned. It was a kaleidoscope of disaster, a visual scream trapped on a loop. Then, the images shifted, abruptly. The fire was gone, replaced by desert, Humvees, the familiar, harsh sunlight of Afghanistan. My breath hitched. I saw myself, younger, leaner, haunted even then, but not yet broken. And with me, my squad. Kim with his goofy grin. Ortega, always cleaning his rifle. Faces I hadn't allowed myself to properly remember in years. The IED. The flash. The screaming. My own personal fire. The screen went dark for a heart-stopping moment. When the light returned faint and pulsing, it illuminated the theater seats. They weren't empty. Every single one was occupied. Mannequins. Hundreds of them, it seemed. All facing the screen. Their blank plastic faces tilted upwards. Men, women, children. A silent, captive audience for a horror show of memory. Then, one figure in the front row moved. Slowly, stiffly, it rose. Not entirely mannequin. Half of its body was smooth, painted plastic, but the other half was disturbingly, sickeningly human, albeit pale and desiccated. It was wearing tattered, faded Marine Corps utilities, the digital camouflage pattern still vaguely recognizable. As it turned towards me, my blood froze. The human side of its face. I knew that face. Sergeant Marco Diaz. My platoon sergeant. Killed in that same IED blast, that had taken a chunk of my leg and a whole lot more of my soul. His one human eye, milky and unfocused, found mine. His mannequin arm, still jointed and stiff, rose in a shaky but unmistakable salute. Then, his voice, a dry, rasping whisper that seemed to come from a long way off, filled the silent theater, cutting through the last fading notes of Lily's song. "Vance! Told you death wasn't the end of the line, Private. Just a change of scenery. Life, death, they ain't what we thought they were, Sergeant Diaz." Or what was left of him, fused with the cold plastic of a store dummy. His one good eye, milky as it was, held a flicker of something that looked disturbingly like recognition, maybe even grim satisfaction. My mind struggled to process it, to reconcile the man I'd served with, the man I'd seen die, with this thing standing before me in a derelict cinema. Diaz? The name felt alien on my tongue, a relic from a past I'd tried to bury 6 feet under. What is this? What do you want?" His human lips, cracked and dry, pulled back in a semblance of a smile. "What do we want, Vance? A way out." His voice was still that raspy whisper, but it carried a desperate weight. "We've been watching you, since you walked in. Some of us, we can sense certain frequencies. Veterans, mostly. You boys always hear the cries of the trapped, don't you?" He gestured vaguely with his mannequin arm towards the silent plastic audience. "They scream pretty loud in here, even if you can't always hear it with your ears. Frequencies. Trapped cries." This was getting crazier by the minute, but the conviction in Diaz's fractured voice, the sheer impossibility of his presence, lent a terrifying credibility to his words. Suddenly, the air in the cinema grew heavy, thick, like before a thunderstorm. The flickering light from the projector intensified, then sputtered violently. The walls around us seemed to shimmer. The peeling paint, the water stains, they began to writhe, colors swirling like oil on water. A low hum vibrated through the floor, through the seats, through my bones. "The bleed," Diaz rasped, his human eye darting around. "It's getting stronger. This place, it's unstable. Always has been since the fire, but it's worse now. Your presence, it stirs things up. I didn't need him to tell me. I could feel it. A nauseating, disorienting sensation, like the very fabric of reality, was fraying at the edges. The smell of ozone mixed with the char and stale popcorn. Before I could ask what the bleed meant beyond the obvious visual horror show, Diaz was urging me out of the theater. "Come on, Vance. Not safe in here when it gets like this. Courtyard. Central hub. It's clearer there. Sometimes. Me, a half-dead, half-plastic ghost of my former sergeant, and the ever-present, singed teddy bear clutched in my hand, stumbled out of the Cineplex and back onto the second-floor concourse. The shimmering, writhing effect was even more pronounced out here. The walls of the mall weren't just discolored, they were sweating. A thick, black, oily substance, the same stuff I'd seen leak from the security guard mannequin, was weeping from the plaster, running in rivulets down to the floor. As Garrett had warned, stay away from reflections if the walls start sweating black. But it was impossible to avoid them. The entire central courtyard, a large, open space that plunged down to the first floor, its fountain long, dry, and filled with debris, was now coated in this glistening black ooze. And it was reflecting. Not the derelict mall, but me. My past. Horrifyingly clear images swam in the dark, viscous surfaces. The IED exploding, the blinding flash, the screams of my men. Lena's face, pale and still, in the wreckage of our car. Lily, small and bewildered, asking why Mommy wouldn't wake up. My own face, contorted in grief and rage, smashing a bottle against a wall. Each image was a fresh gut punch, my failures and losses laid bare on the weeping walls of this damned place. Then, a new sound. Not just Diaz's rasp, but a chorus of whispers, seeming to emanate from the walls themselves, from the very air. Hundreds of voices, men, women, children, all speaking at once, yet somehow distinct. The drifters. It wasn't your fault, they seemed to sigh. A collective, sorrowful exhalation. The road was slick. The wires were buried deep. You couldn't have known. Absolution? From these trapped souls? It was too much. Ninja. Then the air crackled. A shadow detached itself from a particularly dark, oily patch on the wall opposite me. It wasn't a reflection. It was something else. Taller than a man, impossibly thin, with limbs that bent at unnatural angles. And teeth. God, the teeth. Rows upon rows of needle-sharp points in a maw that seemed to split its face in half. No eyes, just that terrifying, all-consuming mouth. Failure. It hissed, its voice a symphony of scraping metal and tearing flesh, a voice that bypassed my ears and went straight for the fear center in my brain. You failed them all, Marine, your squad, your wife, your daughter. You belong here, with the other broken things. It lunged. Impossibly fast. I stumbled back, a yell tearing from my throat, but I knew I wouldn't be quick enough. Suddenly, something slammed into my side. Hard, knocking the wind out of me but also pushing me away from the attacking shadow. I hit the floor, rolling, and looked up to see the one-armed mannequin, the one from the corridor, the one that had pointed to the toy store and the escalators. It stood between me and the shadow entity, its single plastic arm outstretched, as if to ward it off. How had it gotten here? The shadow creature paused, its form flickering, then, with a sound like a frustrated shriek, it seemed to melt back into the oily wall. The mannequin didn't move. It just stood there, a silent, improbable protector. I scrambled into a nearby doorway, a dressing room for one of the defunct clothing stores, judging by the cracked mirrors lining the walls. As I caught my breath, trembling, I looked into those mirrors, and my heart stopped. Not the derelict mall, not the oily sweat. Sunlight, a bright, cheerful room. Lena, smiling, holding out a hand, and Lily, a little older, laughing, running towards me. Daddy, you're home! An alternate reality, a perfect, beautiful lie, reflected in the dusty glass. Then, Garrett was there, materializing beside me as if stepping out of the mirror itself, his face etched with urgency. Don't look too long, Vance. They make trades, these drifters. They offer you what you want most. But this isn't the choice you're meant to make. Not yet. My head was reeling. The attack by that thing with too many teeth, the impossible intervention of the one-armed mannequin, and then the vision in the mirror. Lena and Lily, alive, happy, waiting for me. It was a cruel cocktail of terror and a longing so profound it physically ached. Garrett's sudden appearance, his cryptic warning about trades, and this not being the choice, only deepened the sense that I was caught in a game with rules I couldn't comprehend, where the stakes were impossibly high. The Grandmark, Garrett rasped, his voice tight with an urgency I hadn't heard from him before. He gestured with his chin down the still sweating concourse, towards the hulking shadow of the multi-story department store. That's the heart of it, Vance. The heart of the frequency. Where the signal is strongest. Where the real choice lies. He paused, his scarred face unreadable in the dim, oily light. But understand this. Choices here have consequences. Sacrifices. For you and for them. He didn't elaborate. He just turned his wheelchair with that eerie, silent swiftness and began to move towards the department store, leaving me to follow, the singed teddy bear still a comforting if grim weight in my hand. The one-armed mannequin was gone, vanished as silently as it had appeared. Had it been real? Or just another figment of this mall's fractured reality? The entrance to the Grandmark department store was through a set of heavy, revolving doors, now frozen and askew. We squeezed past them into a cavernous space that smelled of mothballs, old perfume, and the ever-present char. Even in its derelict state, you could sense the former grandeur of the place. Dust-covered display cases, shattered and empty, lined what must have been the cosmetics and jewelry counters. Racks of rotted clothing stood like skeletal sentinels. The silence in here was different, heavier, as if weighted down by the ghosts of a million forgotten transactions. Garrett stopped near a bank of elevators, their doors pried open and dark. "I can only take you this far," he said, his voice softer now, almost sympathetic. "What happens next? It's on you. Remember what I said, what you want and what they need. They aren't always the same thing." With a final lingering look, he turned his chair and disappeared back into the oily gloom of the main concourse, leaving me alone at the threshold of whatever awaited. Swallowing hard, I stepped further into the department store. The bleed seemed less overtly aggressive here, no sweating walls or overtly hostile shadows, but the air was thick with an unseen energy, a palpable thrumming that vibrated deep in my chest. Mirrors were everywhere in this section, on pillars, lining the walls, full-length mirrors in what were once fitting room alcoves. And each one offered a different, distorted reflection of me. One showed me gaunt and hollow-eyed, the drunk I was becoming. Another, a younger, uniformed Marine, full of piss and vinegar. A third, just a vague, shadowy outline, barely there at all. It was like looking at all my possible selves, all my past failures and future fears, laid out for inspection. As I moved deeper, towards what looked like the menswear section, the floor beneath my feet began to change. The cracked linoleum seemed to soften, to ripple. I stumbled, looking down in alarm. The solid floor was gone. In its place was a dark, still surface, like black water, perfectly reflecting the crumbling ceiling above. And in that dark water, another reflection. Me, but much younger. A boy, maybe 10 years old, staring up with wide, frightened eyes. A memory I hadn't dredged up in decades. The night my old man had, well, let's just say some nights were worse than others. This place wasn't just showing me Lena and Lily, it was peeling back every layer, exposing every raw nerve. Impressive, isn't it? What this place can dredge up. Sergeant Diaz. He stood near a display of headless mannequins, dressed in rotting suits, looking more solid now, less like a poorly assembled kitbash of man and plastic. The human half of his face bore an expression I recognized, the grim resolve of a soldier facing an unpleasant but necessary task. "It's showing you, Vance," he said, his voice clearer, less raspy, "showing you all the broken pieces, so you understand." "Understand what, Diaz?" I asked, my voice tight. "That I'm a wreck? I already got the memo." He ignored my bitterness. "Understand what's at stake. What we can offer." He raised his human hand, and the air in front of him shimmered. An image formed, clearer than any reflection, more real than the visions in the oily walls. It was a sun-drenched suburban street, a neat little house with a yellow door, Lena, laughing, tending to a flower garden. And Lily. Lily was older, maybe 12 or 13, long-limbed and smiling, arguing playfully with Lena over a watering can. They looked happy, whole. "This is one of the possibilities, Vance," Diaz said softly. "A world where you, well, in this one, Ethan Vance died of a heart attack a few years back. Young, tragic, but they lived. They're okay." His gaze met mine, intense and pleading. "We can do it, Vance. The drifters, all 37 of us here, we have enough energy, focused, to create a rift. A permanent one. Long enough for you to cross over. To that," he gestured to the idyllic scene, "to them." My breath caught. To have them back. To erase all the pain, all the loss. It was an impossible, intoxicating offer. "But there's a price, isn't there?" I asked, the words barely a whisper. Diaz's face, half human, half plastic, fell. "Yes, to open a rift like that, It will take everything we have. All our energy will be consumed, dispersed, trapped here, in this broken space, forever, utterly. But you'll be free, with them." He looked around, a new urgency in his voice. "And you need to decide soon. This place, it's coming apart. The bleed is accelerating. We don't have much time before it collapses entirely and takes us all with it." The idyllic vision of Lena and an older Lily, happy and alive in a sunlit world, pulsed before me, a siren song to every broken, grieving part of my soul. Diaz's words echoed, a permanent rift long enough for you to cross over to them. It was everything I'd ever wanted since that terrible day, a do-over, a chance to undo the undoable. But his other words, the cost, consumed, dispersed, trapped here forever, hung heavy in the air, a chilling counterpoint to the warmth of the vision. 37 souls, trading their agonizing limbo for an eternity of nothingness, just so I could have my happiness back. The department store around us was groaning, the very structure seeming to protest its own impending dissolution. Cracks snaked across the remaining mirrors, and the floor beneath my feet vibrated with increasing intensity. Dust and plaster rained down from the ceiling. Diaz was right. This place was coming apart at the seams. The bleed was no longer just a visual effect. It was a physical force, tearing at the edges of this pocket reality. "We have to go to the security office," Diaz urged, his form flickering slightly, the human half looking more translucent. "That's where the main conduit is, where we can focus the energy." He led the way, not back through the main concourse, but through a series of increasingly dilapidated stockrooms and service corridors, places even more forgotten and decayed than the public areas of the mall. The air grew colder, the smell of ozone and something ancient, like disturbed earth, overwhelming the char. The security office was a cramped, windowless room, surprisingly intact compared to the rest of the mall. A bank of dead security monitors lined one wall. And there, slumped in a wheeled office chair, was Mr. Garrett. He was changed. The black oil I'd seen weeping from the walls now coated half his body, seeming to consume him. His scarred face contorted in pain, yet his eyes, when they found mine, were surprisingly lucid. "Vance," he rasped, his voice barely a breath. "Knew you'd make it. They're ready." As if on cue, the center of the room began to shimmer, not with oily blackness, but with a soft, inviting light. It coalesced, grew, forming a swirling portal, a window into another place. And through it, I saw her. Lena, younger, as I remembered her, her eyes full of love, a gentle smile on her face. And beside her, Lily, small and perfect, reaching out a tiny hand. "Daddy!" Her voice, clear and sweet, echoed from the portal, no longer a ghostly whisper, but real, tangible. Why? My heart shattered and reformed in an instant. This was it. The choice Garrett had spoken of. The offer Diaz had made. My lost family, within reach. All I had to do was step through. I looked at Diaz. He nodded, a grim but resolute expression on his half-human face. I looked at Garrett, half consumed but watching me with an intensity that belied his condition. I remembered his words. "What you want, and what they need." My hand, the one clutching the singed teddy bear, tightened. I wanted to go. God, how I wanted to go, to leave this nightmare behind, to step into that warmth, that love, to hold my daughter again, to see my wife smile. But then, Lily's voice, my Lily's real voice, not the one from the portal, but a faint, tinny whisper, echoed through the room. It was coming from the mall's PA system, somehow still functional. She was singing, "You Are My Sunshine, My Only Sunshine," the song the Drifters had used in the cinema. The song of my grief, my Lily. And something clicked. This portal, this offer. It was born of their pain, their desperation. 37 souls, willing to sacrifice their last vestiges of existence for me. Could I live with that? Could I step into a stolen happiness, built on their eternal suffering? The Lena and Lily in the portal were beckoning, their smiles unwavering. But were they my Lena and Lily? Or just another reflection, another carefully crafted temptation by a dying mall and its desperate inhabitants? My gaze fell on the PA speaker high on the wall, the source of Lily's ghostly song, and I knew what I had to do. He wasn't about what I wanted anymore. It was about what they needed, freedom. Not for me, from my grief, but for them, from this prison. Ignoring the beckoning figures in the portal, I lunged for a heavy metal fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. With a roar born of anguish and a sudden fierce clarity, I swung it with all my strength at the PA speaker. It smashed into the plastic casing, a shower of sparks and broken components. The ghostly singing cut off abruptly. The frequency Diaz had spoken of, severed. The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. The swirling portal flickered, wavered, and then, with a sound like a great, collective sigh, it began to shrink. The black oil that had been consuming Garrett, that had coated the walls, receded, flowing back into the cracks and crevices of the dying mall, as if drawn by an invisible tide. The violent shaking lessened, the groaning of the structure subsided, and in the space where the portal had been, figures began to appear. Not monstrous, not fused with plastic, but faint, glowing outlines. 37 of them. Men, women, children, the drifters. They looked peaceful, their forms solidified for a moment. Their faces, though translucent, held expressions of gratitude, of release. They didn't speak, but a wave of profound thanks, of peace, washed over me. One by one, they began to fade, dissolving into motes of light that drifted upwards and vanished. One annihilized. The Lena and Lily in the closing rift looked at me, not with anger or disappointment, but with a soft understanding. Lily gave a final, small, smiling wave before the rift sealed completely, leaving only the quiet, dusty security office. Silence. A true, peaceful silence, unlike any I'd experienced since entering Anchor Point. Mr. Garrett, now free of the encroaching oil, though exhausted, managed a weak, genuine smile. "You did it, Vance. You set them free." As the first gray light of dawn began to filter through a grime-covered window I hadn't noticed before, Garrett and I walked out of Anchor Point Plaza. The oppressive atmosphere was gone. It was just an old, derelict mall now, quiet and still. In my hand, I still clutched the singed teddy bear. It felt lighter now. Looking back at the silent facade of the mall, I didn't feel the crushing weight of grief I'd carried for so long. It was still there, a part of me, always would be. But something else was there too, a sense of peace, a sense of purpose, however strangely found. Vesa. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to start over.